Hello, my name is Allison, and this is the Quest for Wisdom podcast, a platform to share education, teaching, and homeschool-related content. Since this is the first episode of the podcast, I figured I would share a bit about my background. First, my background as a student, so how I learned and what I went through, and then I'll share some of my teaching experiences that I've had. Also, there is a chance you will hear my children in the background because they are around me as I record this. So just a heads up on that. So my educational background as far as being a student. So I grew up and went to a private Catholic grade school starting in first grade. I honestly don't remember where I went to kindergarten, but it was a pretty small school. I think we had 20 to 25 people in our class. We had a particularly small class, so sometimes I think the numbers even got down to 17, 18. But I attended that school from first to 8th grade. It was not a very pleasant experience. My first grade teacher was wonderful. Well, one of them, we had two. This class was split, and I really liked her. I don't remember her name, but I do remember her husband. He flew in hot air balloons, and she was just very nice, very warm, very wonderful. The other teacher who I got grouped with most of the time, I do remember her name. Her name was Mrs. Conway, and she did not like me. I'm making that assumption because I just wasn't, you can tell when you're kind of disliked or at the bottom of the class, and I was. I also think I had a hard time paying attention in class and doing things I was supposed to do. So I was not a teacher's pet by any means. And I remember in her class one time, the girl sitting next to me, her name was Kelly, and we were all coloring or something, and she had these crayons that go on kids' fingers. Terrible idea, by the way, but that's okay. Kids learn not to put their fingers in things. She had these crayons that went on her fingers, or maybe her name was Anna. I don't remember if it was Kelly or Anna. I sat right next to her. She started kind of moving in pain and crying, and the teacher looked up and says, "Allison, what did you do?" And I just looked up and I looked at her and I hadn't done anything. But instantly I was blamed for causing this girl pain. And I wasn't a kid I was very introverted. As a child, I did not lash out at people. I did not hurt people. I didn't hit. I really just tried to mind my own business. And that was in part because I do remember on the first day of first grade, I went in and we all had our names on our shirts, like on tags. We had name tags. And then we also had the names on our desks. And so we knew where to sit. And it was our first and last name. And this one girl, I didn't even know who she was, comes over and looks down and looks at me. We couldn't read yet, but she goes, "What's your name?" "Allison." She goes, "That's a dumb name." Like, okay. And so then I remember trying to cover my name tag and cover my name up, even though we couldn't read yet. That's just instinctively what I tried to do. So that was very pleasant. I later learned that her name was Marcy Darcy. So it was likely a case of she didn't really like her name, so she walked around and told people like me. I don't know if she did it to anyone else, but she told me she didn't like my name. So that was kind of, not a very pleasant experience. So that was kind of first grade. And then I don't remember much from second grade, third grade, but at this school I do remember third grade. So in third grade I got in trouble and I almost got held back. I wasn't very good at spelling and I was pretty internalized and I think shut down looking back at it, but I didn't know that then. But I did terrible on my spelling test, and my teacher once, she calls me, I don't know, during recess or something, or after school, and she says, "Here's your paper. Here's another student's paper. Tell me the difference between them." I look at the papers, and I couldn't tell. I was like, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is. So she flipped the papers over. She's like, "What's the difference?" I was like, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is. And she did this a couple of times. I couldn't figure it out. Turns out I wrote on the back side of my loose leaf paper. I found out later, while I was in college, that I'm dyslexic. But back then, they didn't know about things like that or weren't as aware. So I got in trouble and I had to rewrite my paper. And that was okay. Actually, it taught me kind of to pay more attention, to write on the right side of the paper. I don't even remember what the paper was about or anything like that. That was my first indication that I remember of being dyslexic. I almost got held back in 3rd grade, but I didn't. They let me move on. I don't remember a ton. I mean, I remember some social interactions, but as far as learning, I don't remember a ton. Other than I was very introverted. No one in the class liked me. I remember this was in 5th grade, I think 4th or 5th grade. We had to, for one of our activities, we had to, hold hands with the people in our row. And the guy behind me, his name was Matthew Ritter. He made this nasty face because he had to hold my hand. And so I was the unpopular kid through 1st to 8th grade. I remember being made fun of on the playground, being told I was ugly and fat, and all of these things that had a big impact on my confidence, of course, growing up. But I made it and didn't like any of it. I really did not like grade school at all. It was horrible. I eventually started to realize I was kind of smart. We had a 6th grade teacher. He ended up getting fired because he yelled a lot, and I think he overstepped his bounds with a student. I don't remember why, but he was starting to teach us. He was a math teacher, and he was starting to teach us a little bit of algebra. And I noticed at one point that if I did the math one way, I got an answer, and if I did it a different way, I got a different answer. And he hadn't taught us that yet. I just kind of picked it up. And I remember him being pleased and encouraging me. And that was when I kind of realized that, okay, I'm not totally dumb, but I don't fit in here. I don't like it. And then throughout the rest of, I guess it's junior high, 6, 7, 8, it was similar. I did terrible in most of my classes. I didn't do very well at paying attention. I didn't do well on tests. I couldn't remember anything. I just didn't do very well, didn't excel. Yeah, so we got to 8th grade, and my mom and my dad were like, okay, do you want to stay private Catholic, school-wise, or do you want to go public? And I knew if I stayed, most of the students I was with were going to continue in the private Catholic education system. And I was like, I don't want to be with them. I don't like them. They all hate me. I can't. So they did give me that choice, and so I chose to go to public school. There was a big change going from private Catholic 1st or 8th grade, and then in high school switching to public school. The classes were, about 100 per class, as far as the entire freshman class. Now we only had 20 or so in each classroom. There were about 100 freshmen, 100 sophomores, 100 per grade. So it was so much bigger, and I was coming from a grade school environment where most of the teachers didn't like me. Most of the students didn't like me. I was just honestly traumatized. I started out being introverted. So being an introvert who then undergoes being made fun of and disliked, it just confirmed that I shouldn't talk to anybody. And in high school, people started to talk to me a bit. I was the new kid. So most of them had come from junior high altogether. So in high school, they got some new people, and I was one of the new people, but most of them knew each other. And over time, I realized that they weren't all mean. I didn't get made fun of in the public high school like I did the private grade school. It was so much different. My parents had sent me to the private Catholic school because they felt the education, the quality of education was better than the public school. I think they were right. I think that even though socially, emotionally, the Catholic school was not very good for me, the education, I think, was better than what was given in public school. We learned things a little earlier. I knew algebra already by the time I got to high school. I knew basic algebra. My whole first year of math, of algebra, was I already knew it. So that was kind of nice. But in high school is when I started to realize I wasn't dumb like they told me in grade school, like the other students did, and how the teachers kind of never directly said, but kind of treated me. I was treated as an outcast by teachers and the students. So it was so different, and I did pretty well educationally. I did pretty well in high school. I didn't have to try a whole lot. Things just kind of came to me. It wasn't so bad. I made it through Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Pre-Calc, and took calculus in high school. Calculus was challenging, for sure, but up through pre-cal, it wasn't too bad. I remember in my Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, so freshman year I took Algebra 1, sophomore year I took Algebra 2, and in Algebra 2, it wasn't so difficult for me It just wasn't difficult. I'm not sure how else to say it. We did have homework, so I'd get my homework done, and it wouldn't take me very long. I would usually do it during my homeroom class in the morning, 10 or 15 minutes. I would just get it done really quickly. And I had Algebra 2 in the morning, and I do remember other students copying my homework, and I just let them do it. I didn't care a whole lot. Part of it is I didn't know how to say no, and I was afraid of conflict, so I didn't really care if they liked me, but I did not want to encounter any potential conflict when it came to saying no. So I just let them do it, and it didn't really bother me in any way. I felt in a way it was helping them. I'm not sure if that was a delusional thought or not, but yeah, it didn't bother me. And then I would fall asleep in Algebra 2 a lot. It was like my nap time. It was a morning class, and it was my nap time. And I remember the teacher saying, "Hey, you can't." And my teacher was really nice. I really liked her. She was like, "You can't sleep in class." I was like, "I have an A. I get my work done. And I'm sleeping in class. So what benefit is staying awake in class going to offer me?" And I was only really able to see myself at that time. Most teenagers are only able to see things from their perspective most of the time. And she kind of looked at me. She was like, "Well, you're not wrong, but it's if I let you sleep to let other people sleep." I was like, "But they don't have A's." They don't have an A in the class. They don't do well on their tests, so that's why they can't sleep. And I actually reasoned it out where she would actually let me nap in my Algebra 2 class as long as I maintained an A in the class. And on the science side, I don't remember all the science classes I had, but I was always interested in science, and I was very interested in art too. I took art when I could, and then I remember taking biology. We had a forensic science class, we had a chemistry class, and we had a physics class. And I remember I got into physics as a junior, and it was usually a senior level class because you had to be in pre-calc to be able to take physics. And I remember the first day, my science teacher, she came around the room and kind of talked to everybody, and she, teachers can kind of tell, or they know what grade you're in. There's just a vibe for the different years. So she comes up to me and she's like, "Are you a senior?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "You're a junior?" Like, "Yeah." She's like, "Are you in pre-calc?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm allowed to be here." She's like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then she moved on. But so I was in a class with a bunch of kids that were a year older than me, and I didn't really have a whole lot of classes with them. But that year I moved up, so I had my math and my science classes with the senior class instead of the juniors. I don't remember if there were any other juniors in physics, but my high school physics teacher, her name was Mrs. Patterson, and she was excellent. She was probably the best teacher I had in high school, and I think she really inspired me and encouraged me. And in high school, it was interesting. The public school, the teachers were much more encouraging. I never felt any of my high school teachers were judging me or discounting me. I feel like they were all actually very supportive, especially compared to the private grade school. Really dramatic difference. My math teachers, my science teachers, and even the art teachers were all very supportive. I don't remember much about English. I guess I did. We did take government, and that teacher, she was just kind of nuts. We had an English teacher that was kind of nuts too. They were just kind of off the rocker, but as long as you put forth an effort, you could pass. So yeah, I remember more of my science and my math classes, and it was really cool. My physics class, my physics teacher, she really inspired me, and my math teachers did too. I wasn't as dumb and worthless as I thought I was coming out of 8th grade, which was really a good thing. Really a good thing. I still was socially pretty awkward. I did have some friends, but I didn't have any like one friend I had through all high school. I guess I did have one, but we met in karate actually, I think outside of school, and he was in the class under me. But yeah, I mean, I made friends and it was really good. There was no making fun of. I do remember this guy tried to date me. He tried to ask me out, and I thought it was a trick. I thought that I was so felt I was so worthless, honestly, to be around, that I thought there's no way anyone could want to date me. So I was like, oh, that's a trick. And this poor guy, he tried for a while. He tried for at least a month, asking me out, sitting next to me, and I just I was a clam. I was like, no, don't talk to me. Go away. And then he actually ended up dating another girl who was actually very similar in appearance and everything to me. So then that was interesting. I was like, oh, maybe it wasn't actually a trick. She was very nice, and I never really talked to him again. I didn't have any interest. In high school, I was also invited to join the NHS, which is the National Honor Society. I ended up not joining. I remember my parents, specifically my father, was not very happy because it was an invite only. It looked really good on paper. So when you were going to college, it looked good that you were in this National Honor Society. I ended up turning it down and not going because I didn't really like the people, the other classmates that were invited into it. I felt that they were a bit elitist, and I had my fair share of elitism in the Catholic grade school. I did not want to be associated with anyone who was elitist or felt that they were better than anyone else. And not all of the students who were in the NHS were like that, but there were a number of them, and I just did not want to be around them or associated with them in any way. And I lacked the appropriate social skills to get along with them. Yeah, it would not have been a good thing for me to do. So I did not join the NHS. I declined it and continued just taking the classes and focusing on what I was supposed to take. So then I moved on. I ended up going to college. I originally wanted to go to college for graphic design, and I had picked an associate's college, and my parents were like, that's really not a good idea. You should really pick a college that offers bachelor's degrees. I was like, okay, fine. I went to Mount St. Joseph, the College of Mount St. Joseph. Now I believe it's called Mount St. Joseph University. But I went there and I started out as a graphic design major. I got through one semester and I loved my drawing class. It was so much fun. It was just so much fun. College was great. And then I had a graphic design course because that's where I wanted to go. So we had you had your set of classes, art, drawing, design. There was another one that was on a computer. I don't remember what we were doing at the time. And then the electives that you have to take because it was a liberal arts college. I got through one semester. I realized that as a graphic designer, I'd be sitting most of the time, during the day for my job. And I was like, I can't do that. I just can't imagine myself sitting 8 hours a day for a job. I just don't think I can do that. I switched majors. I went from a graphic design major, and I remember meeting with my advisor I had at the time, and I really honestly had no idea what I wanted to do. Honestly, what I wanted to do was go be a horse trainer, because I started riding horses when I was 10, but I was kind of bargained into not following that path. So I didn't take that path. My parents said, oh, well, if you decide to go do that, we're basically not supporting you. And so I wouldn't, and I didn't go away for college. I stayed close to home because I had my horse and I wanted to stay close to home. And so it was a really big deal to me to not lose the support of where I lived and the support of having my horse at the barn. Because I was a suicidal teenager, and my horse and the barn were what kept me alive. So it was too much for me to give up. I was like, fine, I'll go to college. Fine. First, I wanted to go be a vet. I was like, okay, I can't be a horse trainer. I'll be a large animal vet. And I was discouraged from that. It's like, no, you're not going to make any money. It's not a good idea. Do something else. Okay. So I ended up picking graphic design. Fun fact, today, guess what there is a shortage of in our area? Large animal vets. So I think it would have been fine. But, it's not what I ended up choosing. So graphic design, after one semester, I switched, and everyone at the time was going into nursing. There was a shortage of nurses. So I was like, okay, fine. I could work in an ER. That's my attention span. I'll be an ER nurse. Okay. I had started taking chemistry that year also. So in my first year of college, I was in Chem 101. So my second semester, I switched to a nursing major, and then it was the following year for me to get into some of the core classes because a lot of them were on a schedule. So my first year I got through chemistry, and then the second year I was put into A&P in some of the nursing courses. My advisor met with me, though, and told me that there was no more room in the chemistry. They had a special chemistry course for nurses. She's like, there's not enough room in there. You can't take that class. I was like, oh, okay. But you've already had a full year of general chemistry. So what you could do is you could jump in and take organic chemistry. Because if you take general chemistry and you take organic chemistry, that's actually more than the chemistry for nurses course. So it's like, okay, great. I'll take organic chemistry. Doesn't sound that scary. I actually really liked chemistry, and my general chemistry professor was a nun. She was amazing. I remember at the very I to be entirely honest, I was an emotional mess in college, especially my first couple of years. And I remember I skipped a bunch of classes. I was not the best student. At the end of the year, I took my chemistry final exam, like the year-end exam. I don't remember how it was. We might have had like the second semester, like our exam for that, and then the final that covered everything. But in any case, at one point, she told me my score. She gave it back to me, and I was like, well, I can't believe I did that well. She looks me dead in the eyes and she's, yeah, you got a brain, girl. Why don't you use it? And that was a big moment for me because this was someone much older than me who teaches a lot of people. I had probably missed 25% of my classes. Like, I really was not good at going to class. And I passed chemistry with like an A or a B, only not even attending, not paying attention, not really giving it the effort I could have. And I did really well in it. And so I decided that, okay, she's telling me I have a brain. She sees a lot of kids. She's telling me I have a brain. I'm going to try. Maybe she's right. So second year of college, I'm in organic chemistry. I'm in A&P. And I don't even remember what else. I don't know. But organic chemistry, my professor for organic chemistry was amazing. All I remember about A&P, the teacher there was good. She was very supportive and she was very good. But all I remembered is I couldn't remember anything. I didn't have retention. And that actually was not something new for me. In high school, my retention was so poor. My short-term memory, it was so bad that I remember actually going to the doctor, my mom taking me to the doctor and us talking to the doctor about, like, she can't remember anything. I'll tell her to do something or ask her to do something and she just forgets, like, immediately. And that was a common theme. Still kind of is, but I have tools now. I had no retention in college, and I was a procrastinator anyways, that, like, wait till 2 days, 1 day before the test or the exam, and then hardcore study. But I decided this year I was going to try a little more, so I tried not procrastinating as much, especially for these A&P exams, but still I couldn't remember. I remember making flashcards to memorize things, and I'd study it for a week. I ran an experiment on myself. I'd make the flashcards right after we went over it, so as soon as we knew it was going to be on the, as soon as we knew we had to know it. And I'd make the flashcards and I'd look at them like 4 or 5 days a week. I'd look at them and I'd still struggle on the test. It's like it didn't matter, like, how much I looked at flashcards or what I did. It just did not matter. So I learned the strategy for me in A&P was actually to wait until about 36 hours before the test and then just hardcore study those definitions, because they would stay in my mind for a little longer if I could kind of really intensely study them for a short amount of time. Then they'd stick in my mind better, and I could use them for the test and pass the test. And then organic chemistry, I did pretty good, but I remember I was clumsy. So in the lab, we had the chemistry lecture and the chemistry lab. And in the lab, the first 3 labs we had, I messed them up. I either broke glassware or I didn't follow the instructions the right way. I didn't follow the procedure. And I messed things up. I got very confused. this was not surprising because I really struggled with like reading instructions and then following through. And part of that I think was linked to the retention or the lack of retention, because I would read it, turn around to go do it and forget, like instantly forget. So I went to my professor after I botched like 3 labs, and he was amazing. And I said, hey, I really like this so far, but I'm screwing it up, and I'm trying. I'm not trying to screw it up. I am trying to perform well. I'm really trying here. And is there any way I can practice? Because I don't wanna mess this up. I don't wanna fail the class or the lab and have to retake it. And he smiles and he says, yeah, we can do that. So I started doing research as a sophomore in college because I asked for more practice, and turns out college professors usually have some form of research that they're doing. So in my time between classes or after classes, I would go in and do research, and that got me more hands-on practice in the lab. I didn't know at the time that it was more of a retention thing with following instructions, but it got me more familiar with the lab equipment and being less clumsy and paying attention and things like that. So, and this was a pretty small college, so it wasn't like, our organic chemistry class had like 6 people. It wasn't a big class, and same for the lab. So we didn't have a lot, and that I think really worked out because the professor was able to give us individual attention and kind of meet our needs in a very specific way, dependent on the class and how we were doing. So it was a really, really cool experience. I enjoyed my work in the lab so much. And I'd realized this the year before, if I didn't do anything about it, chemistry was easy for me. I'm not going to say it was always easy, but it came pretty easy for me. Like, I didn't have to study as hard in chemistry as I did for A&P. Same for math. Like, it came pretty easy to me most of the time, like through a lot, even through Calc 4, like it just wasn't too bad. I actually really enjoyed it. And even when I did have to study hard, I enjoyed it. I ended up learning through my chemistry class that the way for me to retain information is to rewrite it. So I would take my chemistry notes, and I had an extra notebook, and I would rewrite them about 3 times. I'd write the notes in class, and then I would write them an additional 2 to 3 times. And I learned that was how I learned. That was how I could retain information, not by listening, not by watching, not by flashcards or... I had to write it, and if I could write it, it would stick a little bit better. After I realized I kind of enjoyed these things, like chemistry and math, I switched to being a chemistry major. I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. I want to study this. This really intrigues me. I'm good at it. I like it. The professors were very supportive. So I switched to being a chemistry major, and I ended up finishing with my Bachelor of Science in chemistry, and I was the only chemistry major for my year. Like, that's how small of a college it was. I graduated, and I did not get any extra like honors or accreditations or anything because, like I said, I wasn't the best student. I missed a lot of classes. It got better after I switched to chemistry and I developed a relationship with professors, but I could still be really flaky, and I had to retake a number of classes. I remember I took like a fitness class or a gym class, and it was basically just like an aerobics thing, and I skipped it so much that I failed it, and so I had to retake it. I also had to retake my sociology and psychology courses because I got D's in both of them, and they pulled my GPA down, so I was not the best student in college, but that didn't mean I was dumb. I was struggling on a number of levels. Also, in the personal world, I had transitioned out of an abusive relationship, but that's a story for another day, and probably not this podcast or this forum unless I get a whole bunch of requests for it. So I graduated from college. While in college, I did an REU program between my junior and senior year in summer. So you could apply to programs and go to colleges for the summer and go get paid actually a lot of them had stipends, so you could go do research at another college or a college that offered these and get paid. So I got in at the University of Michigan, which is where my physics professor ended up going for his degree, and he was amazing too. I have to give a shout out to my physics professor. Him and I actually, for a while, I wanted a relativity course, but there wasn't quite the demand for it. And so we actually met one-on-one and went over Einstein's theory of relativity. And it was just really cool. I really appreciated that and found it super interesting. But yes, I went to University of Michigan for a summer and worked on a nanoparticle field extraction thruster project. I got to use this like super fancy camera, slow motion camera, and developed a technique for determining the velocity of nanoparticles as they came out of this thruster. And so what we ended up doing, because it's never just one person, like you're working on a team. I was working under a graduate student, and there were 2 other undergrads kind of in the same group I was working with. And we all had our different projects, but we worked together a lot, and they were really nice. But yeah, so my job was to figure out diagnostics for these particles. So how fast are they going? What's the velocity when they come out? I ended up using a camera that they already had and a laser. I used a laser and a screen so we could see, the light pattern. So we shine the laser through the particles as they were extracted. And then I got with another student who was super into coding and like knew how to do that stuff. So I could calculate the velocities one by one, but he could develop a program to automatically determine the average velocity of the particles as they were extracted. So that was a really cool project, and I actually was published as an undergrad, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I don't know if that project ever got published, but I helped another graduate student with some work, some piezo work, and I got on his paper, so that was really cool. Yeah, so then towards the end, I kind of picked majoring in chemistry because I liked it, but there was no long-term plan. I didn't know what I was doing long-term. I was like, I don't know. I barely know what I'm doing tomorrow, and that still goes for me today. I am a very short-term person. I wasn't sure what I was going to do after college. I was getting this degree in chemistry, so our college, like many, had a program to get us in for real work experience or co-ops, things like that. So I did pick up a job at a local chemistry lab that did food and drug testing, or food testing. I don't think, if we did any drugs, I wasn't a part of that. But we did a lot of food testing, so I got in at this lab, and I worked there. It had to have been a little over a year. It was before I went to Michigan, because I quit when I went to Michigan, so I worked there as my junior year. I liked it, but I found it very repetitive. We got the same samples in on a schedule. Every once in a while, they would get a new client, and so we'd get a new type of sample to test, and it'd be new, but the primary challenge in that job was time management. Was like, how are you going to get all of these things done? I didn't really struggle with that at work. Like, I could be very efficient with my time, and then there was a whole group of us working, right? It wasn't just me. It was good, but I was bored. And so I was like, well, I did entertain the thought of going to become a large animal vet, because you can major in biology or pre-med or chemistry and then go be a vet. So I'd considered that, and I still had the horse, and I was still getting some financial help, and it was, that's not a good idea. Okay, it's not a good idea. And I could see it at the time because I was in a lot of debt from undergraduate school, and it would have cost a lot of money to go to vet school, like a lot of money. So I was like, okay, I can see that. And then I learned that I could major in chemistry in graduate school. I could get health insurance, and I could get paid. So guess what I did? I went to graduate school for chemistry. I ended up going to the University of Cincinnati. I really wanted to move away at that point. Like I said, I wasn't the best student. My GPA was okay. It was like a 3.3 or 3.4, but I didn't have extra. I didn't graduate with honors or anything like that. Like, I just made it. And even one of the professors at the University of Michigan, because I talked to a couple of them while I was there, he's like, you really need to get your GPA up. Like, on paper, you're going to have a really hard time competing. And he was right. So I ended up getting in at the University of Cincinnati, which was a very good school. And yeah, it was an interesting experience. By interesting, I mean wonderful. It was great. I loved graduate school. So it's quite funny because like I didn't like grade school, junior high. High school got better, college got better, and graduate school got better for me. I joined a research group. So as a graduate student in chemistry, you join a research group and then you typically teach. You teach and you have your research that you do. I taught and did my research, and I joined Dr. William Connick's group. He was amazing. He was a really good professor. I remember meeting him. Just the way he talked was very different. He was very thoughtful in his words, and if you hear me getting emotional, that's because he died. But he ended up passing away, but I'll get to that in a minute. But he was very good at what he did, and he was also very tall. So when he took the steps, he would take 2 steps at a time because he was just very, very tall. Yeah, it was interesting to try to keep up with him. Yeah, Dr. Connick was very thoughtful, and he was different than a lot of the other professors. Even the way he spoke was different. The words he used were different. I remember him asking about my interest and kind of the things I liked about the classes I had been in. So I shared that with him, and he said, well, a lot of the things you've said really resonate with me and, some of the projects I have in my group. And I just remember him using the word resonate like that. And I was like, oh, no one uses words like that in normal conversations. That's so cool. But he was just a very thoughtful human being and very humble. He was a genius, like a freaking genius, but very humble. So I ended up joining his group, and I got my research project where I started out with kind of 2, which sometimes happens, like it depends on who you work for. But he, gave me 2 projects, and I started out on both of them, and then I kind of took one, and I really ran with it. Like, I loved my research project. So I continued with that, and it was, I guess for anyone interested, I won't go into it very heavy here, but it was working with multi-electron transfer in palladium and platinum complexes. So my project dealt with a specific palladium complex, and we were interested in multi-electron transfer and the mechanism behind that. So this complex was specifically designed to undergo the transfer of multiple electrons. When it went, or as soon as it would lose one electron, it would lose the second one because the energy barrier was lower for the second one. And then my job was to figure out how that happens. Like, what are the details behind that reaction? What are the steps in that reaction? And I loved that project. I thought it was very cool. In addition, in grad school, you teach, right? So I was a TA, a teaching assistant, and I taught recitation, which recitation is kind of like support for a lecture course. So at this college, the lecture courses were very big. So one chemistry class would have 300 students in it. And then the recitation would break that class up into about 15 to 20. Each TA was given a group of students, and we would help them to understand the concepts, and then we would give them quizzes. And we kind of had free reign. The professor didn't have the time to micromanage us, and he didn't make the quizzes or anything, so we got kind of do whatever we wanted, and I really enjoyed that. And then labs, we taught the lab courses too, and teaching labs was so much fun. I really enjoyed teaching the labs. It was always a blast. I also taught some other courses. As I got up, I got to be a TA for an inorganic chemistry course, which made sense because that was my focus, was inorganic chemistry. And then, what else? Oh, I got to be a TA for chemistry for educators course. So people who are going to be teachers, they don't have to take the real chemistry course. They get their own kind of tailored version of a chemistry course. And I got to teach that also. There were probably some more, but those were the main ones I got to teach. I guess I should say that my graduate degree, so I had the credit hours of a PhD. However, my advisor ended up taking his own life towards the end of my graduate career. And kind of as is a trend for me, I wasn't the best student as far as attendance. I mean, I always tried, but I never never had perfect attendance or anything like that. I also, by that time, had kids. I had twins, and I was in like my 7th year of graduate school. And typically, people finish graduate school in 4 to 5 years. I had really kind of procrastinated and put it off, and my advisor was very busy. He had a lot of us, and you kind of, to get his help, at least with writing, with finishing up, really had to be a squeaky wheel. And I was not good at being a squeaky wheel. I was like, I'll send this over, I'll tell him I sent it over, and then I'll just wait, right? Well, that didn't work well. So in that aspect, him and I did not work well together. In pretty much every other aspect, we work great together. But as far as finishing up papers, oh my gosh, we were a terrible combination. So he died. He took his own life, actually, on the campus in the parking garage. And at that point, I was like, what am I going to do with this degree? I went to do this because I loved it. What am I going to do now? And I had decided I was going to teach high school. So I didn't need the PhD. I didn't need the label of the PhD, even though almost all of the work had been done for it. I had done my closed defense, and there was an item in my closed defense that, so when you have your closed defense, it's essentially a contract. You give this list of things you're going to do, and it's a contract. And you have to get those things done to finish up and give your open defense. Well, one of the items on my list we had talked about, I tried a few things, couldn't get them to work, and him and I had discussed kind of reasoning out of that one. Like, because effort was put into doing it, but it wasn't coming up as possible to do on the timeline. It just wasn't working. However, all of our conversations were in person, so I had no written proof of him giving me the okay to kind of justify leaving that item out. And I kind of talked to the other professors and the head of the department. Could I have gotten the PhD? I think I could have if I pushed really hard for it, but I didn't want to push really hard for it. I wanted to be done. I just wanted to be done. I also think that emotionally, it's hard to talk about, but I couldn't finish. I couldn't write it without him. So yeah, I just decided I would finish with my master's because it was easy. Like everything was done for it. All I had to do was some paperwork and apply to graduate. So I did finish with my master's. So on paper, I have my master's in inorganic chemistry, but in all reality, I have the credit hours of a PhD candidate or a PhD title. And even the drafts, I still have them. The drafts of my thesis that were never finalized. But I accepted that was what I wanted to do, and that was the best I could do at the time. And my goal ahead was, I'm going to go teach high school. Even though that in its own right sounded terrifying, that was my goal, and I did not need a PhD to go teach high school. A master's was totally fine. I just needed to get this thing finished up. Yeah, by that time my twins were 4 or 5 years old, and I was pregnant with my 3rd child. So I needed to finish it up. So I got my master's, and then I did the resident educator program through the Ohio State University. It was all online, and boom, I was a high school teacher. Well, not boom, it wasn't. I mean, kind of. It wasn't that hard. But there ends my formal education experiences. Of course, there's a whole bunch more, but I mean more details, but I think that's good. This is a long enough episode originally. I really wanted to talk about my education and my teaching experience in this episode. However, it looks like this one is just going to be my education. So there is kind of a summary of my educational background from the beginning of what I can remember to the end. And with that, if you made it this far and you listened to this, thank you. I really appreciate your support. This is the first episode of the podcast, and I'm not really sure how it's going to end up or where it's going to go. These projects kind of can be organic and find their own way and take their own shape. So I'm looking forward to recording another one, and the next one will be kind of my teaching experience. I'll share that with you all next time. Again, thank you for listening. You can find me on Facebook, or rather the business name or the entity name, which is Quest for Wisdom. So you can find on Facebook Quest for Wisdom. There's a website, questforwisdom.com. So those are the best places to kind of look for now. And again, if you've made it this far and listened, thank you so much. And yeah, see you in the next episode.